Hello and welcome to MetaWatch, Games Workshop's regular catch-up on all things matched play. In this episode, we're taking a trip to the 41st millennium, and who better to do that with us than Josh from the studio. Josh, how you doing?
Yeah, really good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. So, the chapter-approved Pariah Nexus new mission deck has arrived. We've got it here in front of us.
Yes, we have.
Chat to us a little bit about this.
Yeah, so I mean, for us, it's really exciting. It's like the new season of 40k, so people will get to play brand new missions. So some of the favourites that they've enjoyed in the previous pack are still there, but there's some brand new ones there to enjoy. And we've made some subtle changes in some places and then some bigger changes in others to try and improve the gaming experience for all those players.
Nice. So let's start. We'll chat with a little bit about some of those big changes that you've made. Talk to us about those.
So I think one of the first ones for context is how actions work, because I think that they are used in a number of the different missions. So one of the things we've done in this pack is clearly defined what an action is and how it works, whereas in the last pack there was less of a definition about what units could and couldn't do actions. So one of the big things we've done here is made it very clear what type of units can do actions and what state they can be in within the game. So you can't be battle shocked and do an action. If you are OC0, you can't do actions, which is quite a big change because OC0 units could do actions previously. Then one of the other big changes is in the last version of the pack, if you had an assault weapon, which let you advance and shoot, you could do an action. And if you had pistols, which lets you shoot in combat, you could do actions in combat. That's both been removed. So no longer can you advance and do actions as standard with an assault weapon, and no longer can you do actions in combat just because you have pistols. So that's a big change, and that will affect a lot of people's lists. And then one of the other things we've changed as well is to try and help out some of the big Titanic characters, things like Imperial Knights or Chaos Knights. If you are a Titanic character, you can still do an action and shoot. You can't fight, you can't charge, so that hasn't changed, but they can be performing an action and then still blaze away with their big weaponry. So that's a big buff for them, because they can actually, one of the problems they did have was to do an action, there may be a 400-piece unit in your army, and you didn't want to be using a 400-piece unit just to do an action, then they can't do anything else in the game. This now gives them a bit more flexibility with how they can play.
Very nice. And what about deployments as well?
Yeah, so deployments, so a lot of the favourites from the last pack have stayed, but what we've tried to do with a number of them, there's a few new deployments, and what we've tried to do with them is make them easier to set up and start playing straight away. So we know that some of the diagonal line deployments are slightly harder to measure, and players, when they're deploying on armies, they're like, okay, I have to that cuts through the terrain. How do we make a clean line for that? Have I deployed too far forward or not far enough? So a number of the new deployments follow a similar principle in that they might be across the board in a certain direction, but they're now what we would call a stepped deployment. So within a certain quarter, your deployment zone is a certain box size, and then we give you all the measurements for that, and then it might be in a different quarter, it's a different shaped box. So now you can clearly mark out your deployments, and they're normally all straight lines. There's only one mission that's still diagonal because it was one of the favourites from the last pack, so we kept that one.
Kept it in there.
Yeah. If we know if players like it, and it was one of the favourites deployments from the last pack, changing it just to change it seems the wrong move. So.
Yeah, there's some new primary and secondary missions as well, so tell us about those.
Yeah, so again, with the primary missions, there's some of the favourites have stayed, but even ones that were popular in last, what we've tried to do is, if we could make them clearer or remove any ambiguity, we've done that. And also some of the missions, for example, like the Relic, which stays, we've changed the range of where objectives can be placed, so you can't quite stack all the objectives in your deployment zone, which was possible in the current pack. But then we've also brought out some new missions in there which will encourage new styles of play. So players can now, hopefully when they look at the new pack, it'll be fresh eyes to then look at how their army interacts with those missions and go, actually, I need to take some of these units to interact better with those missions. And then we've worked on some of the missions. So like Sites of Power in the last pack was a very fun mission, but because it was tied to characters, it felt limiting to some armies that didn't rely heavily on characters and favoured armies that did. So we have a similar mission in the new pack, which functions quite similarly, but it's not based just around characters. So now more armies should be able to play the mission and feel it's an even playing field.
Okay. So secret missions have replaced gambits as well with this new pack.
Yeah, so that's a big change for us in that, so the gambits, what we were trying to achieve with the gambits in the last pack was to give players, even if they're losing the game, they have a fighting chance of okay, the primary mission's not going well for me. How do I claw myself back into this game? And that was the principle of Gambit. And what happened was they were probably a little bit too, because it was a random selection of which one you got. You were sort of left to the cards to see, did I get a mission that can actually score? And then there were a number of them were quite hard to actually complete, which meant that a lot of players felt a Gambit wasn't worth the risk. I'll just stick with the primary mission and then hopefully find a way to sneak back in the game playing standardly. Whereas now what we've tried to do with the secret missions is to be able to select a secret mission, you still have to be have less primary points than your opponent. So somebody who's winning the game can't just switch to a secret mission. They're still on plan A.
Yeah, of course,
they're going for it as normal. But somebody who's behind on the score at the end of turn 3 can decide, actually, I'm going to switch from the primary mission and I'm going to go towards a secret mission. And these secret missions, the big change is now you can pick one. You don't have to randomize it. So you can pick one that suits your army. Again, so players now have the opportunity to build their army to favor certain secondary, those missions, the secret missions. So if they are in that losing position, they have a good fallback option. And then the opponent doesn't know which one you've picked, so that you only reveal it at the end of the game. Of course, but because there's 4 as an opponent, depending on what your opponent's army design is like, or if they start to, so for example, one of the missions is you have to hold 3, at the end of the game, you need to be holding 3 objectives not in your deployment zone. So as your opponent, if you realize they're all trying to spread out on multiple objectives, you probably have a good idea which secret mission. Another one is you need to have your warlord on your opponent's deployment zone objective and controlling it. Well, if their warlord is making a beeline for your home objective, you probably know which secret mission they're going for. So there's counterplay for both sides, but the idea is that the secret missions should be more viable as an option if you are behind in the game, to keep the games close right to the end. You are capped slightly in that if you're playing the missions, the normal primary score is 50 points, is the total score you could potentially score. Whereas if you decide to go to a secret mission, all the secret missions are worth 20 points, but you are capped at only being allowed to score 20 points from the primary missions on the card. So you are capped at a 40-point score rather than 50. So your opponent does have that 10-point advantage. If they can score 50, there's no way you can bridge that 10-point gap. But if you can start to reduce their scores, and then you have a decent chance with the secondary and also the secret missions, you might be able to pip them at the end and keep it a really tight, close game.
Nice. And you've also reworked some mission rules as well, right?
Yes. So one of the things we are keen to, without pushing the game too far to one extreme, is we want to reward players for taking battle line units. They're supposed to be the mainstay of an army. So a lot of the mission rules are focused around giving battle line units a buff or extra abilities, which gives them more value compared to non-battle line units. So I think the big point for a lot of players is Chilling Reign as a mission rule's gone, which was one where there was no mission rule that was quite popular to be used. We want to encourage players to have a mission rule in play. But what we have been mindful of is to make sure that the mission play rules that we have are nice buffs without completely throwing the dynamic of the game. So this is where this battle line focuses come from. That sort of ties in nicely, in that a number of the different cards will give you different benefits. So they don't all stack at the same time. So battle line units don't become godlike and they get every ability. Different missions will benefit them in different ways. But a number of those might be one of the cards lets battle line units advance into actions, so we've taken that away from units with assault weaponry, but battle line units will get that now in that mission as standard. So all battle line units will be able to advance and do actions. There's another card which lets battle line units do actions in combat, which again is where the pistol used to give you that for units that had pistols. Now we've put that on potentially battle line units. They can also, in the same card, that lets them shoot and do an action. So again, battle line units are getting dual purpose. They can still participate in the game while doing an action. There's also other cards which let you bring on some of your battle line units turn 1 from reserves, which normally most units can't come on the board turn 1 from reserves. If you're in reserve, you have to be a turn 2 onwards. So we've done a number of cards to try and buff those battle line units. There's also one card which specifically lets them put up raised banners on objectives, which lets them score more secondary points, which helps you score more points in the game. So a number of different tweaks without being huge, massive buffs, but nice incremental buffs to battle line units to encourage players to take a few more of those units.
So before we finish up, what's next for the studio? What have you got your sights set on next?
So for us, this mission deck is a big part of the new season of 40k. So to go alongside that, what we've decided to do is we have brought forward the summer data slate and the summer MFM, which is the points changes. They would normally have come in sort of July time, but to align with this release, we've actually felt, because it's the new season, we want to bring them all together so players will have the chance to play new missions. They will also get the new changes for the points, because some of those points will reflect, like we discussed in the pack, OC0 units can't do actions anymore. They will probably have gone down slightly in points to reflect they've lost some utility. Other units have benefited from this new mission pack, so they may gain some points, but also generally for the balance of the game, as we normally talk about in MetaWatch, we'd be looking at points and how armies are performing on the tabletop, and helping some of those that need a little bit of help, and tweaking some of those that maybe are performing a little bit too highly. With the balanced data slate as well, as we've discussed before, that lets us do some rules changes. So a big one for us is we've been working hard on some AdMech changes, which we've discussed in the previous MetaWatch. So they're going to get some significant rules changes. Cool. So that will hopefully change how they play on the tabletop and give players a brand new lease of life for those players who have really been excited to play AdMech, but have felt that they haven't quite been able to play them the way they want to. So that's really exciting for us. So for us, this is really the new season of 40k. There's new points, there's new missions, there's new cards, and then there's also any tweaked rules that we've wanted to make, all coming together. And in addition to that, one of the things that we know a lot of players have been asking for is, can the studio do an official FAQ to answer those questions that players are unsure about within the game? How do we resolve these issues? So we've also been working hard on having an FAQ that we can publish, which will cover the core rules and every army we do, so players can find the answers to those questions that they're not quite sure how do we resolve. And then a big part of that FAQ is it's not just a one and done process. We're answering a lot of questions now, and we will publish a large FAQ and faction FAQs, but then we will encourage players to send in more questions that they have, and we will be keeping an eye on those through the FAQ inbox. And then we'll be hopefully talking about some of those answers when we get some interesting questions on the MetaWatches going forward, but also we will be keeping that document up to date. So as players get questions, we can answer them so that they can just enjoy their experience playing rather than wondering how to resolve a rules query they're not quite sure on.
Exciting stuff.
Very exciting.
Sounds like you're going to be busy.
Yeah, we've been very busy.
Well, Josh, thanks ever so much for coming in to chat to us about the mission deck. We can't wait for it to arrive. And thank you for joining us. We'll catch you next time on MetaWatch.